Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's GrowthSM talk. Today with me, I have Paul McManus, a customer success engineer / manager. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Alexander. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So, Paul, briefly describe to me your current role and responsibilities.
So currently I'm working for an Internet of Things company. So it's a hardware software company, and I am an account manager / customer success manager. So that basically means once a deal is sold to a new customer, I'm responsible for everything after that point of sale. Overseeing implementation of the hardware, understanding what the executives want, what they consider success metrics, all the way through to the next renewal of the software. So in a year's time, they have to decide whether this was worth buying again, whether value's been delivered. So it's my job to make sure that they are clear initially what value is to them, and then make sure that we get that to them and more.
So, Paul, what's a crucial element of a customer success manager's role?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the most underrated skills is empathy and an ability to listen. Because unlike similar to an AE or an account exec, you have to understand what position the person on the other end of the line is in. But sometimes it's more important for a customer success manager because there's internal, I'll call them politics, but you have to understand something about your buyer and the operator who's using the product, and understand their state of mind, what they need, what their aspirations are. The more you can understand that, understand the person, the more likely you can get them to where they need to go, and make sure that you engage with them in the right way that's most receptive.
Would you agree that can sometimes just be that the decision maker or the person who makes the payment of said product is not, as you've already said, is not going to be possibly the user? It could even be a few steps above their position. So they need to build a picture or a presentation on why this technology will make their lives better.
Yeah, absolutely. Usually that's the case. You're dealing with two levels of persona: the buyer, who's at the executive level usually, and then the operator, who might be an operations person or a manager. And part of the issue is that these people are very busy on the operations front, and change is hard. No one wants to have to learn a new thing when their lives are already pretty hectic at work. So having them understand why this is good for them, why this is going to make them look good to their boss, and going to help them become more successful. And that's why empathy comes into that, in terms of understanding what they need, what their state of mind is, what their day-to-day job's like. Otherwise, it's really difficult just to tie in to their processes and methodologies.
Would you say that what's your opinion on being technical, on being a technical CSM, CSE?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the company stage. I think my career spanned a number of kind of early stage startups, and they tend not to have a built out organization where you get to the customer success engineering group. And so a very built out enterprise level org, or even SMB, will have a very clear stratification of roles, whereas a startup, you're kind of wearing 10 hats and you're doing everything. So I think the earlier the company, the more technical the CSM. And depending on the product, if you're doing something that's a very technical product with an engineering persona that's buying it, sometimes that helps to be technical, just to be able to talk to them coherently. But I think, for the most part, software can be picked up, and it's not a requirement definitely to be an engineer. I think if you're relatively tech savvy, or even if you're just willing to learn, I think that's really more important than being having a technical background.
So Paul, we've spoken about, as you're on the technical side and you sometimes get really deep into working alongside a customer, how should a customer prepare for an onboarding process?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And what I've seen work really well is to have two meetings, really. And the first meeting after the sales call is to meet with the execs and ideally some of the operators. And the purpose of that meeting is to get the buy-in from the buyer at the top and then the operator in the middle, get them aligned on like what success is for the product. So at that point, they're motivated, their boss or their boss's boss is saying that this is important. So they've got some skin in the game. And then out of that meeting, you have the implementation meeting. And on the back of the first meeting, you can kind of give them some specs and say, a lot of times when you're plugging in a product, it needs some kind of data alignment and integration probably. And so the decisions on their end are like, what data do you want where, and at what times? And that's really an internal decision that relies on a few different groups, not just that person. So having that data or agreed on before you get to the next meeting can save a lot of time. Otherwise, you're going back and forth, and kind of the integration will take a long time. So having a preparation meeting to set expectations, get buy-in, and then waiting a little bit to the next meeting can help a lot.
Yeah, because I guess this is the stage where you finally put all your cards on the table. You've had a sales conversation, but it will be mostly either theoretical or hypothetical. And then now during this onboarding stage, you'll have to see, does this person actually have the physical hard requirements to implement a technology? That could be you're syncing this data from this new application into a CRM, but the CRM instance that you have isn't the correct instance that is be able to support this new technology moving on. And I think that's something crucial to highlight to anyone in a purchasing cycle. Yes, you may be finding this great technology, but then it has to integrate with your existing technologies too, which is something overlooked quite commonly.
And a lot of times it's really interesting that the person who bought the software will either read up more about it or just had a complete misapprehension about the expectations for some reason. And it's not always the salesperson's fault. Sometimes, they'll run off and read something else and be like, oh, I think we bought this too. And they didn't. And so having that initial meeting of saying, okay, this is what we've sold you, this is what you expect, making sure those are aligned is super crucial. Otherwise, trying to undo that later is always very complicated and not much fun. So getting it done up front is really important.
And I think as well, this sometimes people don't realize this could be post-sale. This could be contract signed, onboarding processes is beginning, and now we've discovered it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or there's a new expense involved here that they're now going to have to upgrade their CRM instance, which could be considerable more money.
Contractor or something like that. Yeah.
When you actually speak to individuals who are purchasing, there's a technical buyer and there's a non-technical buyer, and those two conversations are incredibly different. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean you might be talking about the VP of engineering or the CTO talking about, okay, what version do we need? How fast is it? Things like that. They're more interested in the how and the in a way, and the exec on the sales or marketing side is always interested in the outcome. So they want more money, less time, less cost per head, say something like that. And so they're totally different metrics and interests.
I think it's also a misconception that you buy it, that's it, let's go. That's it. Yeah. I purchased it, it works, this is my solution. I think only considering, especially a technical product or a technical solution, the buying cycle, the initial 2 to 3 weeks that you have with an account executive and you sign the deal is probably this one of the smallest parts of the entire sales cycle or the entire adoption of a technology. And I think sometimes people do not understand that. They think it's going to be plug and play. This is a great solution. It's going to fix my problems. Because a lot of those problems as well are theoretical.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really true. And I think, you know, to your point about early, the initial expectation setting is super important. But in terms of onboarding and training the team, you know, if you have buy-in from the operator and the exec, but if the sales team doesn't, if it's a sales product and the sales team doesn't know how to use it, or they don't want to change off their favorite product, then you're going to have a problem, because even though you have buy-in, if there's not an understanding on the ground of how to use the product, excuse me, then they're not going to use it. You know, people only do what they know how to use or they were confident to use. So the training aspect is huge as well. I think, you know, a lot of the times that have de-risk renewals are spending time with the team, understanding what they need and what they want. Because the executive level down to the like AE or, you know, operator level on the ground is a lot of levels. And sometimes the exec in a big company doesn't really understand what the latest motions are. And, you know, things like COVID have changed everything. You know, in a SaaS company in the modern world, the markets change overnight, and suddenly you're going from an attacking sales position or marketing position to a how can we spend $0 and still make money, you know. And so that this year's been a really good example of why a CSM needs to be plugged in and empathetic, because this year's been probably more difficult than any I've ever dealt with in terms of customers. You know, people have kids at home, and so suddenly getting people's time is really hard, and understanding what they're going through is very important, because if you're going to ask them to do something, you know, there's a principle: first seek to understand and then to be understood. You know, if you don't get where a person's coming from and you try to tell them something, it's going to be more difficult. So
we're coming to the end of our talk today, Paul. I end every conversation with, what recommendations would you give or advice can you give to someone aspiring to be in the customer success role?
Yeah, I think it's important to be empathetic, but also I think one of the early mistakes I made as a CSM is to just do what the client wanted. And sometimes even if you do everything the client wants, they'll still churn, they'll still not buy your product again, because there is a misalignment, what I was referring to before. At the executive level, the person who buys it has an expectation, and that is the expectation that needs to be met, because the operator is going to say, do this and do that and switch this and switch that. And even if you do all those things, maybe it doesn't answer that higher level question. And if you don't answer that higher level question, then you won't get the signed renewal for the next year, which is really your guiding star.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for everyone who's joined us today on this Growth Talk. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
See you later.
See ya.